Yeah, ladies, for being here. I want to kind of get beyond some of the specifics. First of all, I'm glad you like the changes because I agree with you. I'm looking forward to it as well. I don't think the president will listen to me, though, when it comes to filling that fifth slot. Maybe I'll give him a call and maybe he'll react, but I wouldn't hold my breath. For me, the biggest issue you deal with, it all ties into it. As I see the freight rail industry, it is a de facto monopoly, which is in and of itself acceptable. It is a de facto monopoly, and like all monopolies, therefore they are subject to certain regulations. That's the balance you have. When there's no competition, you get more regulation. It works well for the most part. What has changed in the last couple of years is that and again, not all people on Wall Street are bad people, not all, but some of the vultures of Wall Street have decided to come into the rail industry. And when they do, they start doing to the rail industry what they have done to other industries, which is to strip it down, kind of ruin it for all the other people who are trying to do the right thing, and just make a quick buck without any consequences whatsoever, without any concern what happens to the people who have to rely on this monopoly, or, as far as I'm concerned, for America as a whole. I think America absolutely needs a good, solid, functioning, and growing rail industry and freight. And when you get investors who only look at the immediate bottom line, it's a problem. Up until recently, in the return for regulation and a certain degree of monopoly, the rail industry has been pretty much guaranteed a reasonable rate of return and a reasonable profit to split amongst thoughtful investors and their employees and their leaders. When greed takes over, which it has done in other industries, it hasn't happened in the rail industry yet, but it has creeped into it, starting just a few years ago with the attempt to get into Norfolk Southern. That was stopped, and then some of the things that CSX did, when you have a limited opportunity and you intentionally reduce the number of locomotives, the number of rail, the number of employees, you intentionally stop making investments in your equipment and your people in order to simply raise the price, therefore driving higher profits. If you have a pariah, eventually, if you let that system go, everybody else has to react to it. In my mind, that's kind of what has happened already, which is why, I'm not even asking, but why you had to write a letter that says, due to increased concerns over deteriorating service. The service isn't deteriorating on the good lines, it's deteriorating on the few lines that have seemed to have been taken over by Wall Street. Why the Grain and Feed Association, the Alliance of Auto Manufacturers are concerned about it, and everybody else I hear from. And it was good to me to see the rest of the freight industry stand up against the aggressive attempt to overtake Norfolk Southern. They saw it as a bad thing. I think they were right, and I was glad to stand with them. I'm glad they stood with us. The question is, does the STB have the tools to deal with these kinds of investors to ensure that America has and continues to have a reasonably priced, effective freight rail system? And again, I understand you can't have competition on every rail. We have de facto monopolies. It's acceptable. But that makes regulation essential to keep the system going. And I'm just curious, Madam Chair, whether you think you have the tools to ensure that that continues.
Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate what you have stated. While the board doesn't have jurisdiction per se over Wall Street, we have limited jurisdiction, but one thing that part of our jurisdiction that Congress has given us is that rail carriers have a common carrier obligation to provide service.
Right.
So while, let's take CSX as the example. During the past year, we spent quite a bit of time shining a spotlight on their operations, having weekly phone calls with staff and senior executives. We require them to provide additional metrics on their service. We've been a real pain in the neck to them.
Madam Chair, my time is limited. I don't mean to jump in, but do you have the authority to deny them or to change their rates if they take bad actions? If they can't increase their profits, they're not going to do these bad actions. Do you think you have the authority to take action on that one item? because that's really when everything's said and done after all the good cajoling and discussions, if they can't make that extra profit, that's what they're driven by, because you won't allow the rates to fluctuate that way or you take action, that's your one cudgel. Is it effective enough? Is it strong enough for you to be able to react?
I believe the board has really large, untethered authority should it need to go that route. However, what we would do is a carrier has a common carrier obligation to provide service on reasonable request. You can't get rid of all of your labor, all of your locomotives, all of your cars, just so you can show profits for a year. You have an obligation to serve your customers, and that is what we will make sure you do.
Thank you.
And if you don't, we'll find another carrier who would be happy to do it.
That's what I want to do. And again, I want to be real clear. I think that all of the rail carriers want to do the right thing and have been doing the right thing for hundreds of years. I don't want it to change, and I don't want it to change because there's a couple of sharks coming in only looking at their own profit and without concern whatsoever to the American manufacturer. Thank you.
Mr. Schuster.
Thank you.